What is the most exciting prospect about a brand new Smash Bros. Game dropping? For casual and competitive fans alike, the answer will usually be things like the new characters, the new stages, new music, and new gameplay mechanics. These are all very important aspects to help freshen up the experience, but making a game feel new isn't just achieved by adding new stuff, it's also about updating what's already there. Take the characters for example. It's pretty rare for the Smash developers to completely overhaul a character's moveset, regardless of how much they need it. Like, really need it. But even just retuning a character's existing moveset or attributes can go a long way in reinventing them for a new game. And today, we're going to be looking at characters who received such changes but didn't exactly benefit from them. These are the most nerfed characters from one Smash game to another. Now, just to make sure we're all on the same page, this video is not about characters who fell off within one singular game, whether it be through meta developments or direct patch changes. So you're not going to see someone like Ultimate Pichu, who went from top 5 at the beginning of Ultimate, to later being nerfed out of the upper half of the cast entirely within that game. This is just about characters who fell off from, 64 coming into Melee, Melee coming into Brawl, Brawl coming into Smash 4, Smash 4 coming into Ultimate. So I guess when I put it like that, I am excluding characters who got cut from a Smash game and then came back in a later one. But honestly, pretty much every character that falls into that camp either stayed roughly the same or got better when they returned. The only exceptions to this are Dr. Mario from Melee to Smash 4 and Ice Climbers from Brawl to Ultimate. But even their nerfs don't compare to the characters who actually did make the list. And I think it's finally time I tell you who those characters are. Starting with... it's Kirby. The most nerfed character from 64 to Melee is Kirby. I'm not even gonna try to pretend there are any other candidates for this one. This character tumbled down the tier list cliff and didn't miss a single branch. Smash 64 is notorious for being the only Smash game where Kirby is even a remotely good character. But god damn was he a good character. Despite his small, cute, cuddly, marshmallowy exterior, Kirby's attacks were strong as shit in this game, and they had some insane disjointed range too. I mean, his up tilt alone was probably better than like the entire bottom 5. His moves were spammable, they comboed well into each other, and even trying to put your shield up against them was like playing with a balloon in the middle of an arching range. You're practically just begging for your shit to get popped, and you probably shouldn't even be there in the first place. Shielding sucks in 64, by the way. He was also one of the only characters in that game to have an actually decent recovery. I mean, it was still kind of exploitable, but when every other recovery besides Pikachu's looked like this...
Q would be proud. Another one.
Just grab the ledge. Just grab the ledge.
He's done anyway.
Yeah, you always want to.
Kind of exploitable doesn't seem too bad now, does it? Kirby also suffers from being light and having a combo game that's, again, very, very good, but also fairly shallow, so it's not hard to tell what he's fishing for in neutral. But when that's the worst thing you can say about him, it's no wonder why this was easily Kirby's best showing in Smash. Especially after Melee dug him into a grave that he's still struggling to climb out of even to this day. How do I describe Melee Kirby? Okay, what I think I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a checklist of various redeeming qualities that you would expect a good or even serviceable character to have at least a handful of, and see how many boxes Kirby ticks. Does Kirby have good mobility? Does Kirby have good range? Does Kirby have good aerials? Does Kirby have good ground moves? Actually, his tilts are at least decent, I'll give him this one. Does Kirby have good special moves? Does Kirby have good combos? Does Kirby have a good advantage state? Does Kirby have good kill options? Does Kirby have a good recovery? Does Kirby have good survivability in general? Does Kirby have good or even functional grabs? So, what went wrong with Kirby in Melee? What went right with him? That's the shorter answer. Like, yeah, he isn't the definitive worst in every metric. He's more mobile than Bowser. He has Inhale, so by default he has more usable special moves than Ness does. And he has a better recovery than Ness. But the bars for those metrics are so far below the ground that Satan is using them to host limbo contests. There is nothing redeeming Kirby in this game. And likewise, he dropped from the second best character in 64 to the second worst character in Melee. The single biggest drop in Smash history. But not by much, but we'll get into that soon enough. As for the other 64 characters, they either stayed roughly the same or got better when transitioning over to Melee. There are only 2 other exceptions to this. One of them was Ness, who at the time of Melee's release was actually considered the top 3 character in 64, and he ended up getting nerfed to bottom 5 in Melee. But in the current 64 meta, he's actually considered to be a bottom 3 character, so retroactively they just took an already shit character and made him even more shit. Whoopsies. Thankfully, the other nerfed 64 character actually did deserve it, that being Pikachu. Pikachu has been the undisputed best character in that game since day one, but Melee brought him down to size with nerfs to his air mobility, his specials, his approach options, among many other things. And yet he still wasn't nerfed quite as hard as Kirby was. Probably because unlike Kirby, Sakurai didn't create Pikachu, so he only had to worry about balancing him rather than beating any bias allegations from the previous game. But whatever the reason is, Pikachu is still, if barely, a pretty viable pick in Melee, so he only gets an honorable mention. Oh, I might need a hot minute to think about this one. Outside of like 4 characters, most of Melee's roster got gutted in Brawl. Fox was meh, Sheik was pretty troll, Falcon was god-awful, and the less said about Ganondorf the better. Like, how am I supposed to narrow this down to just one? Wait, no, it's clearly just Jigglypuff. Now, Puff's fall from grace is definitely a lot worse in retrospect, because it actually took her a good while to become this dominant force in Melee's metagame. Hell, she didn't even win her first major until after Brawl came out. I mean, she did so 3 days after Brawl came out, but still. It's nothing like it is today where she's widely considered to be a top 3 character. But, as demonstrated by characters like Samus, Mario, and Ganondorf, even decent or flat out mediocre characters from Melee still weren't safe from Brawl's purge. Puff's defining attribute, that being her incredible air game, was heavily toned down, with her air acceleration in particular being nerfed to be about in line with the rest of the cast, instead of the best in the game by a considerable margin. That honor went to a different character entirely this time, and her back air, which was once a character in and of itself, was made laggier, weaker, and no longer had a disjoint that could reach your house from my apartment. Now, both those things 100% needed to be nerfed, because they gave her way too much leeway to play like a passive bitch. But some of her other nerfs were a bit much. Her already bad ground game got further exacerbated by her ground attacks being slower and weaker than ever. And she had one of the worst sets of throws too, as her forward throw and her up throw had lost all their kill power and combo potential respectively. Her combo game in general was completely ruined by hit stun cancelling, so she couldn't rack up damage worth shit, and she didn't have strong enough kill options to compensate. And this especially holds true for her infamous trump card, Rest. In every single Smash game, Rest has a tiny, negatively disjointed hitbox and enough end lag to where the opponent can set their controller down, grab lunge, and still have time to punish her for it. And that's even if it scores a kill. But in Melee, not only did she have plenty of ways to set up into the move, but the move itself could just reliably kill at 0 anyway. In Brawl though, she has basically 0 reliable rest setups, and even if she did somehow manage to hit the move raw, it wouldn't even start killing most characters until like 70 or 80. It went from being one of the most feared moves in all of Smash Bros. To basically just Luigi down taunt if it took up an actual move slot. All of these flaws, combined with the fact that she was still one of the easiest characters to kill due to her lightweight and floatiness, made her go from a top 3 character in Melee to a bottom 5 character in Brawl. Honorable mention goes to the character she's currently tied with on Brawl's tier list, Captain Falcon, who went from a lightning-fast comboing and killing machine who could just as easily be blown up because he was combo food and had a terrible recovery, to a moderately fast crapshoot with no combos or kill power that was still easily blown up because he was combo food and had a terrible recovery. Smash 4 would take a complete 180 with how they treated their returning veterans compared to the previous game. A lot of the characters that were nerfed coming into Brawl would end up having a lot of their former Melee glory restored. Well, except Jigglypuff, who they made even worse for some reason. But anyway, similar to Melee, the nerfs were generally targeted more towards the absolute tippy top tiers of the previous game. Well, except Diddy Kong, who they made even better for some reason. Regardless, there are 2 characters who really stick out for being the most nerfed from Brawl. That being the Bluebird duo of Falco and King Dedede, who both dropped about 40 spots on the tier list. Falco's drop is mainly due to how badly his neutral got gutted. Both his lasers and his down air were slower and no longer short hop auto cancelled, while the hitboxes on his back air were stubbier and less active. As a result, he had a way harder time approaching or forcing approaches from the opponent. His combo game, while still quite good, really didn't benefit from Smash 4's engine, even with the nerfing of hit stun cancelling. His amazing chain grab was just inherently removed, and he could no longer perform the Gatling combo, which, if you aren't aware, is a version of Dacus where the dash attack actually combos into the up smash. He also died a lot earlier than before because of his weight nerfs and the introduction of rage. Overall, Falco's nerfs were clearly more impactful than his buffs, but the buffs themselves definitely shouldn't be written off. For one, his kill options were significantly better compared to Brawl, but even more notably, his side B no longer put him in the free fall, which combined with edge hogging being gone made his recovery a lot more versatile than ever before. DDD, on the other hand, gained pretty much nothing of value coming into Smash 4. So despite Falco dropping from a higher spot in Brawl, I think I have to give the title of most nerfed character in Smash 4 to DDD. DDD went from being a really solid gatekeeper high tier, held back by a few terrible matchups against some of the super relevant characters, to a bottom 5 character who is now getting gatekept by high tiers and has nothing but terrible matchups into the super relevant characters. Brawl DDD's viability was almost entirely carried by him having one of the best chain grabs in the whole game due to his down throw having set knockback. It was a straight up infinite on a lot of characters, and he initiated this chain grab off of the fastest and longest non-tether grab in the game. But as I mentioned when talking about Falco, chain grabbing wasn't in Smash 4 at all. And even if it was, his grabs were both slower and shorter ranged, so actually initiating them would have been a challenge in and of itself. His back air was also one of his most important tools in Brawl, but in Smash 4, it was changed to a hammer swing, with nearly triple the startup and not even 1/6 of the hitbox duration. And despite using a literal disjoint instead of his foot, the hitboxes on his new bear were somehow shorter and less disjointed. How does that even happen? The move did at least get a sizable buff to its kill power, but unfortunately the exact opposite can be said for most of DDD's other moves. The kill power he once had on moves like up tilt and down tilt were now completely consolidated into moves like jet hammer, dash attack, and forward smash. Moves that are all too slow and punishable to be usable on anyone with even a single digit number of functioning brain cells. So despite still technically having some ridiculously powerful moves, he was very inefficient at closing out stocks, even beyond the standards of a heavyweight. And finally, the Waddle Dees and Waddle Doos he used to be able to launch with his side B were completely removed, so now it could only launch the Gordos. The Gordos themselves were overhauled in a way that does admittedly make them better for ledge trapping, but also significantly worse at killing. And that aforementioned ledge trapping becomes a lot less scary when you realize that you can just smack the thing back at DDD with any move that does at least 2%. 2 fucking percent. Are you shitting me? Like, Brawl Side B already wasn't the best anti-zoning tool ever. I mean, it definitely wasn't out camping Falco or Olimar, but like, with this new one, you can just straight up get punished for even trying to camp back. But you want to know the real kicker? The real reason why I think DDD's nerfs hit harder than Falco's? Whereas Falco at least got a handful of buffs in Smash 4's patches, DDD's patch history consisted of changes that either had no effect on gameplay or made his already bad traits even worse. His already mediocre grab game? Nerfed. His already easy to reflect projectile? Nerfed. His already bottom 1 airspeed? Nerfed. Like, this isn't even kicking the dog while it's down at this point. This is shooting its kids, fucking its wife in front of it, and then kicking it while it's down. These Smash 4 balance decisions are breaking my brain, dude. Let's just move on to Ultimate so the aneurysm can at least happen after the video's over. Ultimate, more than any other Smash game, wanted to level the playing field across all characters. This meant previously terrible characters like Roy, Palutena, and Wario were given massive glow-ups. And even the egregious top tiers like Cloud, Bayonetta, and Diddy Kong were allowed to stay high tier at worst. Well, after their buffs at least. But even still, some former Titans did not end up so lucky, with 2 of them in particular going from top 10 or 15 at worst in Smash 4 to bottom 15 at best in Ultimate. And honestly, I actually had a really hard time deciding who got it worse. The first one I'll talk about is Mewtwo, whose main issue coming into Ultimate was, and say it with me now, The tail hurt box. Yep, wow, who could have seen that coming? Look, everyone knows how bad it is and how many dumb interactions it causes, but one really overlooked issue about the extra tail hurt box is that it removes a lot of the disjoint from moves like back air, up air, and all of his tilts, which makes them way worse for spacing and way more likely to trade with other moves, which isn't exactly ideal for one of the lightest characters in the game. Mewtwo also had the best air dodge in Smash 4, being a frame 2 combo breaker that made him completely invisible, had basically zero lag, and could be done as many times as he wanted until he landed. But in Ultimate, not only was it nerfed to frame 3, but just like every other air dodge in Ultimate, it has way more lag and can only be done once per air time, making Mewtwo's ability to escape juggles and combos that much worse. What's crazy is that beyond that, a lot of Mewtwo's moves actually received utility upgrades. Moves like Fair, Dash Attack, Forward Tilt, and Shadow Ball kill better, his moves are generally less laggy, he's a little heavier than he was in Smash 4. But unfortunately, to a lot of his Smash 4 player base and most new players too, dealing with his new defensive shortcomings just isn't worth the effort anymore, and he's consistently been one of Ultimate's least relevant characters. But since we're on the topic of irrelevant characters that were deemed not worth the effort... Hi Marth, how you doing there, buddy? See we're flying economy this time? Now, me mentioning Marth at all will likely be a source of controversy, because he's probably the single most divisive character to place on an Ultimate tier list. Ask any random person how good they think he is in this game, and there's no telling what they're gonna say. Some people like myself think he's horrible, others think he's just mediocre. There are people who think he's not only good, but potentially better than his Echo Fighter Lucina. People are wrong. Ugh, sorry about that. I think I got something caught in my throat. Anyway, it doesn't really matter how good you think he is, because when we look at objective metrics like results and representation, the fact of the matter is that the Hero King is more washed up than the 1980s Garfield phone. Marth's claim to fame has always been his tipper mechanic, where his attacks deal more damage and knockback at the tip of his sword, but less so at the hilt of his sword. Even back in Marth's glory days, this design concept inherently added a degree of inconsistency to his gameplay, because more than most other characters, his spacing had to be on point when it came to his combo game and closing out stocks. I mean, the term Martharitis was invented long before Ultimate after all. But Ultimate was not only the game where his game plan was the most centralized around this mechanic, but it's also by far where it's at its least consistent and effective. Compared to Smash 4, Ultimate as a game is faster paced, doesn't have quick micro-spacing options like perfect pivoting, and has more input delay. So the game is already fundamentally set up to screw Marth over. But even beyond that, the amount of sauce he lost from just his Smash 4 version, let alone his Brawl or Melee versions, is not doing him any favors. A lot of his tippers were either made more precise like Nair and Bear, less powerful like Side B and Down Smash, or in some cases both, like his iconic forward air. These changes of course made it way harder for him to kill with his sword attacks, but even his up throw, his most reliable way of getting a kill without using his sword, was made weaker. The utility on his moves also took a hit, as his forward throw and his jab, which used to be really good at starting combos, just kind of can't anymore. They really don't do much of anything now beyond the bare minimum of their respective move categories. But the final nail in Marth's coffin, and the reason why he's going to be my choice for the most nerfed character coming into Ultimate, is because swordy competition in this game is so much more stacked than it has ever been. If you want a more high-risk, high-reward swordy, Cloud, Aegis, and Roy fill that role better than Marth could ever dream of. Because yeah, they do have their own inconsistencies, but they more so stem from their fragility, not their inability to execute their game plans to begin with. Meanwhile, if you want a more well-rounded swordy, Corrin is better, Wolf is better... What? He counts, he's basically just a swordy's edgy persona. And even Marth's own goddamn clone is far more worth your time. Now, to be as fair as possible, maybe the existence of similar, more immediately threatening options did result in Marth being rather underexplored. I get that. But if your results have been consistently looking like this for the past 6 years, just get in the unemployment line and pray that Kirby Air Riders doesn't delay Smash 6 for too long. And those are going to be my picks for the most nerfed characters from one Smash game to another. I think Kirby and Jigglypuff for Melee and Brawl respectively are basically unarguable, but Dedede and especially Marth for 4 and Ultimate respectively I could see sparking some controversy. I'll eventually make a companion video detailing the most buffed characters from one Smash game to the next, but until then, let me know your thoughts on my picks for this list, drop a like and a sub if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you guys in the next video.